Hi. Is there two smoothies here? No, you don't. Okay. I need something that's decaf then. Yeah, or frappuccino. Is that the same kind of beverages, coffee?
Yeah, Frappuccino sounds delicious right now. Hey, Diane, can you please mute yourself? Thanks.
Yes, sorry about that.
I mean, you got me thinking about Frappuccinos, though. I'll probably do that. Janice Langley, you're unmuted, just in case you're in a place that's loud. I think you're all right, though, but you're unmuted. We are recording. Share my screen. All good, Janice. Can everybody see? Someone unmute themselves and tell me if they see seller assisted interest rate reduction strategies. Are we
Yeah, I
good?
can see it. I see it.
Appreciate y'all. You guys are really ready to roll. I like it. I appreciate it. And I'm going to try my best to stay on the chat a little bit, but if somebody could monitor the chat, this is a really open call. It's a multi-agent, multi-company call. So there's more than Berkshire Hathaway agents on it. So welcome if you're not in Berkshire, of course. Let's get going. So this is a unique time in the marketplace. Today, we're going to try to keep this to 30 to 45 minutes. And I'm going to get through material really quickly so that we can get to questions. And I'm happy to back up on slides. I'm happy to reshare the screen. A lot of what you're going to see are essentially cut and pasted flyers that we can co-brand. So, so stay up there. But what we're going to do is just do this at a real high level, but you know, let's do it on a real basic level too. So if I get too mortgagey, okay, if I get too mortgage gobbledygook, I need you guys to slow me down a little bit and tell me to back up, and it's okay. We are officially in the trust tree. It doesn't matter how many years you've been in the business. As I've been going through this a little bit more than anybody, I myself remember when mortgage wasn't familiar, and I don't assume that just because you've been in the business for 10 years or more that you know all this stuff. So it's okay, because you're not alone if you've been in the business more than 10 years and this is still kind of, I'm not sure. Okay. As you come on, just make sure that you're muted, and so we don't get any background noise. But let's get started. So as I try to advance the slide, here we go. All right. Why are we talking about seller assisted rate reductions now? Why does this work now? One reason is because home ownership and equity, that is the percentage of ownership against the debt of the property, it's at an all-time high, meaning most people, a lot of people, percentage-wise, own their house nearly all to themselves, right? So they have more profit than normal to assist a buyer. That's one detail that is relevant today that all of a sudden has become way more important than it has in the past. Two, price cuts are a reality, and it's a recent reality. Obviously, we've been in a very mixed market, and that doesn't apply to every single property that's in the market right now. But as you know, price cuts started probably in July, and the housing market is really built like a cruise ship. It takes, it's built very big, and it takes steady turns to finally make it a shift in the marketplace. At least in terms of certain things. And after these price cuts of a few months, we've now actually seen housing data show overall average price decline. So the first thing you see is price cuts, but not necessarily housing price declines. And then eventually, after a few months of price cuts, eventually you'll see those housing prices decline. And that's what we're seeing now. Here's another little tidbit that I didn't really, I know that I don't really often reference, and it is a tax item, so I'm going to say it out loud that I am not a tax advisor. But there's also a limitation to how much tax-free cap gains can be made by selling a primary residence. So a lot of times people have, I think by now people know, if you stay in your primary residence 2 years or longer and you're single, you've got up to $250,000 capital gains tax-free when you sell. And if you're married, it's $500,000 up to capital gains tax-free. So another reason why a seller might be more inclined to share and provide seller credit, seller assistance to a buyer is because it limits the tax that they pay. And I'm going to say it again. Here's my asterisk. I'm not a tax advisor, but if you're holding on to multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars of gains, and there might be more than 500,000 of it, if you're married, any dollar above 500,000 is going to get taxed. So that's another reason that you could bring up. And so just sort of food for thought as you speak to potential listings, and then people that you have currently listed. And then finally, negative headlines are making the case for us in a way. This is an issue that, higher mortgage rates, normalized mortgage rates, however you want to say it, plus sort of a mixed bag on the housing market itself, plus what is to happen in the next 12 to 24 months in the economy. All these things are sort of whipping us around a little bit. So they have our attention, they have our sellers' attention, they have our buyers' attention, and it's affecting their behavior. So this is a co-branded flyer. Dorothy gave me some permission to use this. I just cut it out. And so this basically describes what we're talking about. So on a really basic level, what are we talking about? We're talking about a listing that is ripe for what you would reflexively do, which is to reduce the price if it didn't sell in the first 30 days. And this is an alternative way to reduce the price maybe a little bit, or meet the seller where they're at in terms of their willingness to bring down price. And we're providing an alternative strategy to, instead of cutting the price X amount of dollars, let's help the buyer by providing them credit. And that credit goes on the multi-board, as you know, it's at the bottom of page 1. And on our side, all you're doing here, and all you would be doing in your public and private MLS remarks, would be simply telling the agent or the people directly, the buyers directly, who are looking at Zillow late at night, Redfin late at night, you can use this credit to get a lower rate. You can use it for a lot of different things, but this is a way that you can get a lower rate if that's your objection. And we know statistically that it is, right? So what is it? So on a real basic level, what is a mortgage point? A point is the way that you get a lower interest rate on a mortgage. A point is really simply, and I'm not going to read this, a point is really simply prepaid mortgage profit. All you're doing is you're paying upfront more of the profit that a lender would get on the back end if someone paid into the loan over time. All you're doing is providing more of the profit upfront. It's called a point, and that's it. It's called a point. There is a percentage point. You don't have to do a full point. 1 point equals 1% of the loan amount. So a half a point would equal 0.5% of the loan amount. So getting a lower rate is done on the pricing side. It's done by us, and all the agent would need to do is just simply write in the number of dollars that would be provided by the seller to help the buyer. The buyer can, again, theoretically do whatever they want with the credit. All you're doing as an agent is giving them what they should do in order to get a lower interest rate, compliments of the seller. So points equal one is a percent of the loan amount, not the purchase price. So if you're thinking about this, don't think about it in terms of purchase price necessarily. Think about it in terms of the loan amount. It also means that the down payment of the buyer matters, right? So if somebody puts down 5% on a $300,000 listing, a point for them is going to be different than if someone's down payment was 20%, because the loan amount is different. So therefore, since the loan amounts are different, then the point total is going to be different dollar wise. And this bottom part of this is what I really want to direct you to. This is why dollars and not points should be used in the MLS remarks. Stay away from using the word points. It's a mortgage term and you need a mortgage license to do that. That may not be exactly right, but it's good advice no matter what. Just be careful with points. You're better off referencing below market interest rate may be available, and it's may not will, and seller assisted dollars like $5,000 or a certain amount of dollars relative to the purchase price is what you want to get to. So now we need context, and as you join, make sure that you're on mute. Everybody, make sure that you're on mute so it doesn't we don't get your background noise either. Okay, thanks. So some takeaways, and I was talking to a few agents on this. April was really helpful here too. What we want to say next is, okay, well, how much help and what should we be providing? So again, we're going to get to some examples in a second, but in your thinking, like, well, how much can I benefit? A good back of the envelope assumption that you can make. And again, don't hold me to this because this is going to be different for different people and different situations, but about 1 point on a loan is going to give or take equal about a 3/8 of a point reduction. So that would mean 3/8 would mean instead of 7%, someone would have a 6.625% rate. That's 3/8. So instead of 7.0, it's 6.625. If you added 2 points to a loan on average, you're going to get about 3/4% of interest rate reduction. So again, same example, 7.0% is going to go down to 6.25%. And obviously the different loan amounts are going to give us different results when it comes to the number of dollars per month that are being saved. So this, if there's anything else that you take away from this, this is probably the most important, sort of easiest slide to remember, which is, you're going to be able to, if you're able to provide a couple of points in dollars worth of credit to somebody, they're going to be able to get nearly a full point of interest rate reduction over 30 years. This is on a slide too. We can, it's on a flyer too, excuse me. We can co-brand this flyer as well. But I did want to go through it. And this is basically the bang for your buck flyer. Like, it's a pretty busy flyer. Let me explain it to you. This is what it would look like if a seller were to offer to buy down the rate for a certain dollar figure versus if they simply drop the price. And then that last column, price reduction needed to match the payment, that is what you'd need to drop the purchase price to in order to match the value of just simply buying the rate down. So in other words, in a real basic way, remember my market notes emails of don't cut the price yet. All we're doing is we're looking at, instead of dropping the price by X amount of dollars, provide a credit for X amount of dollars, save the seller a little bit of premium, and provide the buyer with some relief on the interest rate, and then tell them how to use the credit. That's what this flyer is. It's a pretty good one. It assumes 20% down. It assumes 389.5. I do not know who came up with that. We could have used the whole number there. But whatever, it's 20% down. That's what that 311,600 is. That's 80%. It assumes 7 1/8. So this is a slightly old flyer because rates are a little bit lower than that. But it's going to compare a 3% reduction in price. You see that the 389.5 in that purchase price line goes to 377,815. And then in that next column, it compares what if instead of you reducing the price, you offered a credit. You the seller, offer a credit. And that credit is basically 2 points of the loan amount. You'll see that the credit up there at the top in the seller contribution, $6,232. If you do the math on that, that is 2 points or 2% of the loan amount, right? So $3,116 is 1%. You can see the loan amount there times 2 is 6,232, and that equals 2 points. You'll see that the reduction in interest rate is 3/4 of a point. And then you see at the very bottom that payment savings of what happens if you reduce the price. It reduces the payment of the buyer $63. But if you buy down the rate and keep the price the same, it reduces the monthly by $155 and change. And if you wanted to do that just by simply reducing the price and nothing else, you'd have to get all the way down in price to a little over $360,000 to get that similar bang for the buck reduction in monthly mortgage payment. Okay, now I'm going to come back to this slide. We can talk about it again, but I'm going to move on because the next one I think is my jumbo example that I cut and pasted. This was a company issued presentation that I basically chopped up and kind of made my own. But we can come back to this. And again, this is on a flyer. This is directly from a flyer of ours. And my exploration throughout the mortgage industry has multiple lenders having some semblance of this. So if you happen to utilize more than just us, I bet that you could get one of these from other lenders as well. Let's move on. So here's a jumbo example. It's the same basic example, same basic layout. We've got a 1.25 million price with 20% down, and we're doing the comparison of a 5% reduction versus simply routing $20,000 of credit. $1 million. This is a way better flyer because it's even number. So $1 million loan is 20% down on 1.25. 2 points would be 20,000 because 1 point equals 10,000. Just take that decimal point from a million, bring it over 2 spots, you get 1%, which is 10,000 times 2 equals 20. That's 2 points of the loan amount, not the purchase price. Yeah. So you can see in the comparison, should I provide a $20,000 credit and keep the price the same? Or should I cut the price by 5% and that dollar figure 62.5? So should I give a $20,000 credit, or should I give a 62.5 price reduction? And then you'll see on the far right column, in order to match the power of the rate buy down, you'd have to cut the price from 1.25 down to 1.154, which is a difference of nearly 100 grand. So again, it really does do a pretty good job of getting, and I hope you're getting a sense of kind of what we're doing here and the concept here, because it's pretty powerful. We've heard the marry the home, date the rate language, and I like the marry the home, date the rate language. This is a company generated flyer. I really like it. Homeowners can refinance their mortgage in as little as 6 months. You can always refinance. I think that's the other thing that people sort of assume is going to be available in the future. I'd like to believe that it's going to be available in the future. And I think that there is a point at which people are going to be able to refinance. I just wouldn't count on it. So there's sort of a built-in assumption in a way that people are going to be able to refi in the future. And I do think that that's true. But I also think that if you watch and listen to what the Federal Reserve is doing, saying, behaving, and if you look back in history, and I was a history major, as many of you know, back when we had to bust inflation back in the late 70s, it got kind of ugly on rate increases. And while what the Fed doesn't it directly impact mortgage rates, it's not particularly good for them either when they rise. So they've been really clear. Jerome Powell's been really clear about what he wants to do and how he's going to do it. And unless they, start doing some different things, and they might, if they inflict enough pain, they might start doing some different things, but I wouldn't bet on it. So what does that mean to us here today? It means that, we have to be really good with our buyers about explaining that, one, these are rates that have been around before. They feel higher now. I mean, they feel higher now, but they have been here before. We've all gotten into, let's say, been to the hotel, got into the hot tub outside. Maybe you're at an island, you get into the hot tub outside for the first time, and it's like, whoa, wow, it's hot, right? And so you slowly inch in, and you're kind of paralyzed, right? But then eventually over some time, you get used to it. You get your whole body in below that water, and all of a sudden it feels fine, right? And that's kind of what we're doing right now with mortgage rates. The only difference is we got kind of pushed in a little bit, and so people are a little bit jostled right now. So it takes a little bit to get your bearings and refocus. But honestly, the people that can refocus the fastest, and that's what we saw this past weekend with open houses, kind of going bonkers. There was a lot of people out over the weekend running around. People are starting to refocus, and if you can get your buyers and your sellers on board with some of the things that have been meeting people's issues with buying temporarily, you'll be in a real good position to have a nice Q4. Make sure that you are muted as you join. That is it for my prepared marks and prepared presentation. Let me stop the share. And let me start my video. All right, what did I miss? Who's got a question, and what did I miss, if anything? Does anybody have any questions about what I was saying?
I got a question for you, Jody.
Yeah, go ahead, Kent.
And this might be a stupid question, so laugh at me if I'm not thinking this through. When they're paying down those points and getting the reduced monthly payment, over the whole, if they don't refinance it over the whole entire life of the term, by not reducing the overall cost of the loan, they're still going to end up paying more than what they're paying. I mean, in the long run, they're still paying more, even though temporarily they're going to pay a lower monthly rate, correct?
No, don't confuse temporary buy downs with what we're talking about here. Those are two different things. When you are out and about in social media and you see 2-1 buy downs, that is a temporary drop in mortgage rates. 2-1 buy downs mean the first year it's 2 points below, year 2 it's 1 point below, and year 3 it's what you would have gotten if you just went contemporary. And there's a cost to it. There's a big cost to it. It's usually over 2 points. That's completely different than what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is we're talking about a seller who is going to provide money that the mortgage lender on the other side is going to see on a contract and say, oh, I can use that to buy down permanently the interest rate of my buyer.
Okay, I guess maybe I worded it wrong. That interest rate, though, over the course of 30 years is still going to be more money than if you're able to talk the seller down and then they pay the higher interest rate?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so it's circumstantial.
Yeah, I would not say that it would be over time. I mean, over 30 years, I'm pretty comfortable saying that a house's value is going to be higher than where you're buying it now. Just based on how our economy works and how fiat currency works. Inflation gentle or inflation aggressive, over time things get more and more valuable. That's just how fiat currency works. That's how the dollar works and how everything else works. So the concept itself is, again, just keeping it simple. You don't necessarily need to, not cut the price, but all we're saying here is instead of cutting the price as your only avenue in terms on the listing side, providing a credit right now meets the immediate pain point of many, many, many buyers out there right now who have been, remember, rates doubled this year. We got jostled, like we
Yeah.
got whipsawed. And I've been saying it for a while. It's really hard to have a cup of tea after you got jostled, like it's really hard to settle yourself back in to have a cup of tea. And that's what we want. We want buyers. We're trying to tease buyers out from where they are. And they're always going to be looking at houses. And so what we're trying to do is create and advertise a strategy which can bring a buyer that's looking at properties on Zenlist, if you've got them on Zenlist or wherever, out and say, hey, I saw this thing. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? And then bring in truth to power about like what you do when you make an offer and what it means to the seller and what the alternative is, and the fact that it's worse for the seller to cut the price
Right.
than it would be if you just simply offered a credit that you told the buyer's agent to tell the buyer, hey, this is what can be done. And this is the amount, and here's why we're choosing this amount. So in the buyer example that's on this flyer, it was 389.5, right? So 389.5, a first-time buyer of 389.5 is going to be, let's say it's 3% down, right? So that's going to be roughly $11,000 for a down payment, right? For somebody who's buying a property, 3% down, 389.5. They're going to have, if you're able to buy down somebody's interest rate by 2 points, which is going to be $7,200, that person's going to have a reduction of interest, compliments of the seller, of 3/4 of a point or $155. Here's the other thing that's not mentioned, and maybe more important than ever in terms of context. In terms of context, buyers are already with their own money putting in an average of about a point on their own.
Mhm.
So 2 points compliments of the seller, 1 point out of pocket from the buyer. You've got a further reduction of interest rate and a further reduction of monthly payment. And then from there, what do? Right? Well, I could refi if rates go down. And now my break even on the cost is way, way, way less. Because why? Because the seller provided the money to get me the lower rate, not me. And if I do, there's a certain break even in the future that I can help somebody with, and it's usually a few years in the future. But at the very least, what are my options from there? Well, if rates reduce, and if they reduce by 3/4 of a point or half a point or whatever, I will be the first one to be like, yeah, let's refi, right? Because I want to refi my own clients. I don't want them to refi with somebody else. So I keep track of my own book. But also, if rates don't go down, you've got your lower rate.
Right.
And if they don't go down anytime sooner before you sell, you've got that lower rate for the time that you're in that home and until you sell. Makes sense?
Are you limited on the maximum amount of points other than like whatever's put on the contract? Like, is there a max that you can ask the seller, you request the seller?
There certainly is. Yeah, there certainly is. The easiest way to think about it is, again, it's down payment specific. So 3% to 10% down is 3% max seller credit. If it's an FHA loan, it's 6%.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for answering those questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the basic conversation, Kent. That was good. It's probably pretty helpful.
Thanks for everybody else for listening while Joey and I shoot the shit here.
Who else has a question, Beth?
Yeah, and if it's, how did you know? And if it's more than, if it's more than 10%, you said 3 to 10% is 3% down, and then if it's like 10 to 20, 10 to 25.
Yep. On a conventional loan, 10 to 25% is 6%. And the full sentence on that, Beth, is it's 3% max, 6% max, 9% max if it's 25% or more. We rarely see that, but the seller concession would be up to 9%. Or total number of closing costs, whichever is lower. So on someone's loan estimate, if the total number of closing costs, and that is everything, if that bottom page 1, if that number is lower than the credit that the seller provides, that credit needs to be reduced to match that closing cost number. That's the rule.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Does anybody else have any immediate questions? Very cool. Well, I appreciate everybody
I
getting
think
on.
I think a question popped up in the chat
Oh, thanks.
earlier.
Yeah. Jody, oh, here's Sarah. Jody, if the seller provides this credit to their buyers, does this affect their overall sale price of the home? What shows up on the MLS after it closes? I don't know the answer to that question, because it's an MLS question and I'm not sure. Maybe someone else who is an agent can help. So if somebody's got a 375, let's say 375 purchase price with a $5,000 credit that is showing up on the contract, not as part of AI. And it's a net 370 to the seller because they're providing 5K of credit. I don't know what shows up on the MLS after it closes.
I think on the MLS, it does show up as the actual price, like sell price. And then, yeah, it doesn't really reflect the concessions on the MLS from my understanding.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Rakia.
You're welcome.
I think that we kept this to a half hour. I don't mean to rush anybody off the phone or off the call or whatever. But I appreciate you joining. And certainly if anybody has any questions in addition to this, let me know. But the conversation that you have with a buyer or a seller is really simple. You know, it really is simple because the loan it's the thing that gets priced. The seller's not cutting a check prior to closing. The buyer's not writing a check prior to closing. Nothing's going to change hands until closing. What you'd want to do is write it in to the contract so that on the contract, you'll see that there's a seller concession so that it can be addressed. It also doesn't necessarily limit what comes out of AI either. You could ask for additional if you wanted to, but on the listing side, you probably would want to maybe address that before you settled on, you know, an overall deal structure as to what, if anything, especially if it's a house that is obviously in need of some, you know, repair. Like if you're representing a buyer, you may be saying to the sellers, to the listing agent, we're going to use this amount to buy down the rate. So thank you for that. But we also may have some things that come out of AI and that may affect how much we're going to ask for. We may ask for an addendum for an additional amount, depending on what comes out of AI. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. If you have any
Thanks,
questions,
Jody.
reach out. All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.